Volume versus efficiency. Where do the fantasy points come from? And who should we be targeting in our fantasy drafts? Because it is a debate every single year where people just argue volume is king. But we are back with our series this offseason once again. And today we're talking volume monsters for the running back position. Headliner Nation, I love this series. Volume monsters, high efficiency, debating where exactly we're getting our fantasy points from. But this year's show is going to look a little different because Jake is going to be joining me and we are going to be touching tips today.
Okay, so I will share some tips. Touching tips probably won't happen in this show.
Touching tips with the nation.
That's not much better.
Like a new show.
That sounds like a different channel.
A new live show, Touching Tips with the Nation. But Jake, we're going to be hopping into the running back position today. And these videos are super in-depth, super analytical. But if you want to get even deeper with the fantasy value, then you got to do it with the best value in the fantasy industry, our 2026 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. There is a link in the description down below, tfhdraftguide.com. Get yours right now because we have more information available even earlier than the offseason than we ever have had before. And it is literally, I feel like, coming out like every other day with new information in the draft guide.
100%. Usually it's like June 1st, the first week of June when we really shoot for it, but there is a ton of information out there already. Dynasty, Redraft, whatever you need, we're going to have you covered this offseason. And I will venture to say, Kyle, the upgrades to this year's draft guide will make it better than any draft guide we've ever done.
So if you want to be covered in fantasy juices, then make sure you get your draft guide today. Another new t-shirt for the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into it. We've got several individual categories to talk about. Then at the very end of the video, we are going to average them out and we are going to talk about the biggest volume monsters from last season and what that meant for fantasy points before turning around and doing this again next week to talk about efficiency. But in terms of rushing attempts, the guys at the top are the guys that you would figure to be at the top, right? At the top, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, James Cook, Derrick Henry, Bijan. Last season, 4 running backs, over 300 rushing attempts. We had 10 over 250 rushing attempts. And one interesting name, Jahmyr Gibbs at 243, just missed that, just outside the top 10. Will he be inside the top 10 this year with no David Montgomery?
I think it's going to be dang close. And I think he probably stays close to there, though. I don't know if they really... This will probably be something we get into later on with the efficiency side of things. I don't know if he needs more than 250 or so carries to be great, but the days of 300 plus carry running backs, it's really starting to fade quickly. You see that here. There's just not a lot of guys that get huge volume, and now it seems like 250 plus is what 300 plus kind of used to be.
Absolutely. Moving on to rushing yards. When we take a look at this category, there are a couple of individual players I want to touch on real quick because you take a look at Devon Achane. He finished 14th in rushing attempts, but he finished 5th in rushing yards. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, who finished 11th in rushing attempts, but 7th in rushing yards. And that's where we'll get into the efficiency next season, or next week. But when it comes to just overall volume, that's what I take a look at. But there's also one other guy too, and it's Ashton Jeanty. He's a guy that people don't love my opinion on him right now. He was 7th in rushing attempts last year, but only 18th in rushing yards. Didn't even get to 1,000 yards last season on the ground.
That's a problem. And now obviously there will be some things that are different this year. New coaching staff. Hopefully the offensive line is a little bit better. But I don't know if I can view Ashton Jeanty as ever really going to be one of those most efficient type guys. I think he's always going to be a volume related running back. Not that that's a bad thing by any means, because he's capable of handling a large volume. I just don't see Ashton Jeanty's style, but more so in the Raiders offense, ever being a guy like a Jahmyr Gibbs or somebody who can really, outperform given the touches that they're getting. So is it disappointing? Yes. Is it going to continue? Probably. It could get a little bit better, but he's probably always going to be one of those guys that just needs close to 300 touches every year to return draft value.
Now, this is one of my favorite statistics to take a look at.
Not
One of them, not the favorite statistic.
One of.
I love avoided tackles. I absolutely love avoided tackles. It's one of the main things that I look at in my dynamic running back rating. Bijan Robinson led the way last season, and it wasn't
Not
even close.
No.
Bijan had 86 avoided tackles last season. The next closest guy, Jonathan Taylor, had 67. But what is even more impressive than that is Bijan had 86 avoided tackles on 287 rushing attempts. Jonathan Taylor had 67 avoided tackles on 323 rushing attempts. One of the reasons why Bijan is RB1 for me right now.
And this is why I like avoided tackles as well. I'll look at broken tackles too at times, but broken tackles, in my opinion, is like, okay, you're fighting for that extra yardage. Avoided tackles leads to big plays, to chunk plays, to boosted efficiencies. And to see Bijan there is not a surprise whatsoever. Maybe what is a surprise to me is Kenneth Walker. I mean, Kenneth Walker had only 221 rush attempts, but still finished 5th in this metric with 61 avoided tackles. To me, that says he's somebody that, despite lower volume, has the ability to avoid more tackles and break off more big chunk plays.
He's like, oh man, people are going to hate me for this. He's like Diet Jahmyr Gibbs.
I'm talking like RC Cola version.
Like, yeah, like we're talking like go to Dollar General and get their cola. We're not even talking like Walmart or Meijer brand at this point. Which,
and I'm glad that you use Dollar General because they're everywhere. Like everyone knows.
Walmart's everywhere too, but you guys probably don't have Meijer's. I think Meijer's a Midwest thing.
Yeah, we don't have Meijer's here. We have Publix. We have Harris Teeter. We have the Food Kitty or Food Lion, if you want to call it that.
Don't get me started on Publix, man.
Dude, the chicken tendies, hot and fresh tendies.
Sub. Oh my gosh. Publix has the best subs, but they do. We're getting way off here. Let's move on to rushing touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor, 18 rushing touchdowns last season. But what the best part about this is I feel like Jonathan Taylor was either scoring 3 rushing touchdowns in a game or no rushing touchdowns in a game.
All or nothing.
Yeah, a whole lot of everything or nothing with Jonathan Taylor. But Derrick Henry, we've talked about Derrick Henry a couple of different times over the last week. Concerns with him in terms of efficiency. We'll dive more into that next week. But this is why I still don't mind him is like a really solid RB2, 16 rushing touchdowns. I don't think that number gets a whole lot lower this year.
I think as long as he's in Baltimore and as long as he has a pulse, he's going to be near 15 every single year. It is kind of weird to see Zach Charbonnet all the way up here with 12 rushing touchdowns. That is crazy.
Same amount of rushing touchdowns as James Cook.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, obviously, we're not going to have Zach Charbonnet majority of the year due to the injury. But what does this say about Jadarian Price and how much opportunity could he have? That's probably a name we should talk about a lot this offseason because with no Kenneth Walker and a hurt Zach Charbonnet, Price could be in line to be probably one of the biggest sleepers of the fantasy football season.
All right, it means one thing to get a lot of touches, but I also think it means a whole lot on where those touches take place because there are certain guys who can hold value with a lot of touches inside the red zone. So who's getting the most carries in the red zone? Well, last year, Christian McCaffrey, 75 carries in the red zone, 5 more than Jonathan Taylor, almost 15 more than Derrick Henry. And when Kyle Shanahan says, I want to reduce the workload on Christian McCaffrey just a little bit, you got to wonder if this is one of the areas he's talking about.
Well, and here's the problem is going into this year, they're going to have Mike Evans, but they won't have George Kittle to start the year for the most part. So who's really going to be the red zone guy? I mean, opposing defenses are going to be looking at Mike Evans. Christian McCaffrey is going to continue to get touches. This also says that Jake Tonjes could be a thing early on in the season. It's massive numbers inside the red zone. Once again, we see Zach Charbonnet here with 51 carries out of 184. All of a sudden, Kyle, I am starting to get even more excited about Jadarian Price because all these numbers keep popping up with the Seattle backfield. And even though Kubiak is gone, they're still going to run the football quite a bit. But the other guys that are in this metric are guys that you would kind of expect to be there. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, James Cook, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Kyron Williams. I know Kyron Williams was a big topic, right? Everybody's like, well, Blake Corum is taking away some of those red zone carries. We still have Kyron Williams here with 53 red zone carries? That's still a huge number.
Absolutely. And we've talked about guys at the top of the list for each category. There is a guy I want to hit on at the bottom of the list in this category, and it's Breece Hall. Brand new contract with the New York Jets. The New York Jets have revamped their offense. They think Geno Smith and his second tour in New York is going to be the difference maker this year, and I don't know if I fully believe that or not. But this is where it gets interesting because we know Breece Hall is super talented. We know Breece Hall has the ability to break off big plays. We know he's a game changer, but he's all the way down at 27th in red zone carries. He had 24 red zone carries. And while we're in the middle of talking about that, let's transition over to goal line carries as well, because when you take a look at goal line carries, Breece Hall last year only had 4 goal line carries. Does that have to do with them just not wanting to use Breece Hall there, or were they just not there enough?
I'm pretty sure the Jets only had 4 goal line carries all season long.
He got all 100% of the goal line.
He had 100% of them probably. They didn't score very much. The quarterback play was horrible. They were barely in the red zone a lot. When they are in the red zone, they're still throwing because they're down multiple scores and they can't afford for the clock to continue to run. Breece Hall is not the issue. Breece Hall is talent-wise, he should be in the top 10 to 12 or so of these lists every single year. This is a Jets issue, and unfortunately, I don't know if there is enough different this year to make these numbers that much better, and that's why he's not being drafted as early as he should be based off of skill alone.
Let's talk a little bit about pass catching running backs now. Now for the volume stats, let's go to the passing game and let's see which running backs made the biggest impact last year. In terms of targets, of course, Christian McCaffrey led the way, not even close, 121 targets. Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Chase Brown, Devon Achane, but it's a new face, or let me rephrase that. It is the same face, new place in Tampa Bay, with Kenneth Gainwell. And one of the reasons why last year I was super high on Bucky Irving, and while I still think he can be good, Kenneth Gainwell being in Tampa Bay now gives him a huge issue in terms of overall volume.
Yeah, Kenneth Gainwell is capable, very capable of not only catching passes out of the backfield, but doing something with it once he actually gets it. And that is going to be to Bucky's detriment for sure. Bucky is capable of being a 3-down back, but if they really wanted that, they probably wouldn't have even brought in Kenneth Gainwell. They'd probably keep Sean Tucker and just roll with the two of them. The fact they brought in Kenneth Gainwell says, hey, we want this skill set in our backfield, and that's not a good sign for Bucky because he's not the most efficient guy at times. He needs some of this pass-catching work, and if he loses the majority of it to Kenneth Gainwell, that could definitely hurt his fantasy value.
And one more guy to touch on at the very end of the list here as well is Woody Marks. 36 targets last season. David Montgomery, new in town after the trade. He only had 26 targets last season. But David Montgomery doesn't join a backfield that has like a solidified pass catching back that's going to keep him off the field the same way Jahmyr Gibbs did in Detroit. And we saw it when there were plays specifically designed for David Montgomery in the passing game in Detroit. He did very well. So you have to wonder, since Woody Marks isn't really that pass catching back anyway, if David Montgomery is going to see a little bit of an uptick in volume in the passing game this year.
I think he has to, based on what he's seen in Detroit recently. I think he pretty much has to, and it's not going to be a huge number. I don't think he cracks 50, but I still think he's north of 30, and that gives him enough of a boost to where he's locked in as like a RB2 at minimum each week, or probably one of the most solid flex plays you could have on your fantasy team.
Yeah, again, that ceiling that he had in Detroit might not always be there. We looked at him as a guy like, oh, if we draft him, we can put him in our lineup. He's like an RB2, but he has RB1 upside. This year, it's more like, hey, he's a flex with RB2 upside, but if we can get more volume in the passing game, it helps that floor. In terms of receptions, again, not even close. Christian McCaffrey had 102 receptions last year. Next closest one was Bijan Robinson, then Jahmyr Gibbs. Of course, Kenneth Gainwell up here. I do like to see Chase Brown. I do like to see Chase Brown this high. He was 6th in targets. He's 4th in receptions. When we get on over to receiving yards, he's top 10 in receiving yards as well. I think that really helps him establish a really solid floor there as well.
One name that has continued to pop up here in the passing side too is RJ Harvey. Now, RJ Harvey, we see him here. He was 8th in targets, 8th in receptions. We love the prospect of RJ Harvey. They brought back J.K. Dobbins, and I don't love that. Even though J.K. Dobbins seems to get hurt every year, it just takes away enough volume. But I still feel like if RJ Harvey can get some of that early down work and pair it with this pass catching side, he will be massively undervalued in drafts this year and could be somebody that we stash on our bench that could end up by week 4 to 6 turning into somebody that we can probably consider weekly as a flex if he can get some of that early down work.
It makes the draft pick of Jonah Coleman even more weird, I guess, when it comes to the Denver Broncos, because Jonah Coleman at the NFL level is probably only going to be like a pass catching back. So hopefully that doesn't hurt RJ Harvey, but I'm hoping Jonah Coleman, they're like, oh, well, we'll give him a year to develop, and then maybe J.K. Dobbins is gone next year, and then RJ Harvey takes over, and Jonah Coleman doesn't cause us very many headaches.
That's kind of how I
to receiving yards. I mean, receiving yards, really, it was Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson towards the top here. Jahmyr Gibbs at number 3, but it's basically been the same few guys at the very top. McCaffrey, Robinson, Gibbs, Achane, Gainwell, Brown. It is interesting to see Jonathan Taylor up at number 7.
Yeah, considering he doesn't get huge passing volume. And honestly, this could continue this year. If Daniel Jones is coming back off of the Achilles injury and he's limited in his mobility, they may use the short passing game at time to take off some of that pressure. That could lead to more Jonathan Taylor checkdowns. I don't ever want to depend on those. We always say don't depend on touchdowns. I would almost rather depend on Jonathan Taylor's touchdowns than his pass catching upside. So to me, anything he gets in the passing game is kind of like gravy on top. But I do think there's an opportunity there for him here to get right around, 40, 50 targets once again this season and be decent in the passing game.
I don't want summer to go fast, but you just said gravy on top, and I'm just like, I could go for a good Thanksgiving meal right now.
I mean, why you got to wait till Thanksgiving?
That's true.
You should just have mashed potatoes and gravy for lunch, and that's it. Just mashed potatoes and gravy. Okay, stuffing and gravy too.
Stuffing and gravy.
Okay.
Might have to do that. Receiving touchdowns. He was 11th in targets, 13th in receptions, 15th in receiving yards. But Travis Etienne, Achane, however you want to say it, 6 receiving touchdowns last year, 2nd in the league, the most receiving touchdowns that he's had in a season. But with Alvin Kamara still on the roster, I find it hard for him to duplicate that as of right now.
Probably. I mean, I do think Kamara is moved by the time the season comes along. We'll deal with that when it happens. But to me, that says that that gives the Saints the green light to say, you know what, we're going to part ways with Kamara because we have a running back that is capable of something similar. I'm not going to say the pass catching upside of Travis Etienne Achane is the same level as an Alvin Kamara, but he's good enough in the passing game to where they don't lose a whole lot by going to him. And in an offense that's improved, I think Travis Etienne could once again find himself pretty high up in some of these metrics when it comes to passing volume.
All right, so we've broken down some individual categories.
Yep.
And the names that you see on this list are the top 30 running backs in fantasy points for half PPR leagues last year. So now that we've talked about all of the categories, we are going to go and we're going to average them all out. How high did guys finish across the board? Let's talk about tier 1 to begin with. At the very top of the list, again, there's not going to be a ton to talk about in this area. Maybe a couple of guys here for a second, but Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, James Cook. I think everybody can agree that those are probably, even right now, the top 5 consensus running backs in terms of drafting this year. The 2 names that are interesting after that are the guys that slide into the top tier scores here. Travis Etienne, 10.5, and Kyron Williams with a 10.8. You have to wonder if those scores change this year.
I mean, my heart, Kyle, my heart
No.
wants to say no, probably not. But my brain is like, man, Blake Corum could take just enough to bump Kyron Williams out. Or what if the Saints do keep Alvin Kamara? Like, there's still some question marks there. I still love both of these guys. And honestly, where they're going to be going in drafts after some of these big names, these are guys that you may be able to get in like the third round. I don't hate it, because I think the potential is still there. Even guys that we'll see in the next section that are super close to these guys, their names are going to be going multiple rounds in front of these guys. So the chance that they still have this opportunity, they've shown past performances of doing this. I mean, Kyron has been great for multiple years. It's not like it's just happened one time. ETN has flashed multiple times. I think they'll be on the verge of this section once again at the end of 2026.
And this is where next week's videos will come into play. If you're watching this video, stay tuned for when we talk about insane efficiency next week, because that's where we really dive into, okay, let's say Travis Etienne and Kyron Williams lose some volume this year. Is their efficiency good enough to continue to hold up their fantasy value close to what we saw last year? And that's where we get to make the decision of, oh yeah, just because they lose some touches, it's not going to matter because they're super efficient. So make sure that you are tuning into that video next week. Heading on down to tier 2, anyone that scored from 11 up to 15, Chase Brown, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Jalen Warren making his way into this area. Haven't mentioned his name, and DeAndre Swift as well. Chase Brown, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, they all scored 11.5 or lower. Yeah. So they were as close to tier 1 as it could possibly get. I think Jalen Warren is the name here that strikes me as the most interesting because they added Rico Dowdle.
And had it been the same coaching staff as last year, I don't think I worry about it. But now that we've gone to Mike McCarthy, he was with Rico Dowdle in Dallas. He loved Rico in Dallas. They brought him in this offseason. It's not like it's just a free agent signing. This is a coach going out and getting one of his players. Yep. And that right there is what signals some worry for me. I think it's going to be about as close to a 50-50 split as possible. And even though we saw Jalen Warren lose some to Kenneth Gainwell down the stretch of last year, he still played pretty well, but I don't think it's really going to matter. We do have another pass-catching weapon in the offense now with Michael Pittman in town as well. I think Rico comes in here and totally makes this a backfield split, and that neither one of them are probably on this list last year, towards the top of it anyway.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see Saquon Barkley as well. Does he make his way a little bit higher? We know that beginning of the season, they did a lot of things to kind of limit the workload after a huge campaign the year before. Do they go back to limiting? Do they not? Because if they limit his workload the way that they did last year, and he finishes in this area again, does he deserve to be picked in the first round?
Probably not, which is scary to say. But I mean, if it happens again, it's probably going to turn into one of those things where it does move to like a second round pick. It'll be an early second round pick, but he'll be right there with the guys that he's kind of close to on this list. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry. I mean, even Ashton Genty, if he doesn't explode compared to what he did last year, they're all right in that same area, mid-second round or so. Maybe that turns into great value for your fantasy football team. Maybe it just signals that we're in the downhill slope of his career. That's crazy.
Not something I thought I'd be saying in 26. Tier 3. Tier 3, moving on here, guys that scored between 16 and 20 or lower than 20. So we've got Rico Dowdle, RJ Harvey, Kenneth Gainwell, Breece Hall, Zach Charbonnet, Travion Henderson, Kenneth Walker. We already talked about Rico Dowdle for a second. We've talked about RJ Harvey a little bit, and Gainwell, and Hall, and Charbonnet. We haven't talked about Travion Henderson. He actually has a higher volume monster score than the guy that was arguably the better running back last year, Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, they're close, but Henderson is the explosive guy, right? He is the guy that can do a lot with a little. He only had 180 rush attempts. He didn't have huge volume, but still outscored the guy in the offense that had the majority of the work each and every week. We saw it when Stevenson went down when he was injured, and they gave Henderson more volume. He produced massive numbers. So this is all going to come down to the fact whether are they going to stay committed to Ramondre Stevenson? Or were they only committed to him because he had pictures of Vrabel and Rossini? I don't know. But, I mean, there's an opportunity here for Travion Henderson to be probably tier 2 next year if he can get more opportunity.
The jokes that people were saying on Twitter last year about does Ramondre Stevenson have pictures of Vrabel cheating on his wife, they hit home way harder right now.
Yeah, they make a lot more sense nowadays, for sure.
And for Kenneth Walker, I mean, we mentioned him for a second, but I just want to mention again, we know the volume has been the issue. The efficiency has never been the issue. When we take a look at his efficiency next week, you're going to know exactly why it's hard to quit Kenneth Walker. It is. If there is an addiction in my life, Kenneth Walker may be that addiction. More so than Joe Mixon at this point, I think.
Okay, well, I hope so, because Joe Mixon's done. You know, I mean, Joe Mixon ain't coming.
But for a while there, I would go to bat.
For years there, you were the Joe Mixon truther in the industry for sure. Kenneth Walker, it doesn't come down to talent. It comes down to health and volume, and if he can get it, he's going to excel.
Who was the guy that apparently was so much better than Joe Mixon? Remember
Zach
that on
Moss.
Twitter?
It was Zach Moss.
Zach Moss, that's right.
Zach Moss was the second coming, and apparently Zach Moss, I don't even know if Zach Moss is in the league anymore, to be completely honest.
Oh, man. And I'm not going to name any names because, to be honest with you, the people who were saying that, I don't even see them around anymore. Yeah. So
when you plant your flag on Zach Moss, things can get
There's
sketchy.
A reason why. Okay, moving on to the last tier. Who could make their way out of here? We've got Ramondre Stevenson, Quinshon Judkins, Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, Tyrone Tracy, Woody Marks, Kyle Monangai. Jake, this is what we're going to do for the final tier, okay? Yep. I'm going to give you a name, and you're going to give me a number on a scale of 1 to 10, your confidence that you believe that player could jump all the way up to the second tier this season.
Okay.
You ready for this?
1 through 10, you said?
1 through 10, your confidence that player will go from tier 4 to tier 2 this coming season.
Okay.
Ramondre Stevenson.
2.
Travion Henderson is there. Just talked about it. Tough to do. Quinshon Judkins. 2 numbers. Quinshon Judkins if he's not ready for week 1. Quinshon Judkins if he is ready for week 1.
If he's not ready for week 1, I say we're going to go down to a 5. It's going to be a 50-50 split because we can't trust injury reports. If he's fully healthy, I think it goes to an 8.
Whew. All right. I was thinking the same thing about Judkins. If he's healthy, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Tony Pollard.
The offense is going to be better. I'm going to all the way up to tier 2, though. It's probably like a 3.
Nick Singleton, they drafted him. He could end up taking some touches away, and they still have Tajay Spears, who's missing basically 2 knees. David Montgomery.
9.
9. Ooh, even more than Judkins. Okay.
I think because I'm not worried about Woody Marks, to be completely honest. I think David Montgomery going back to being the guy is going to put up good numbers.
So if I were to say Woody Marks, you're going to say 0, or would you say 1 since you said 9?
Yeah, I'll give him a 1 just to make sure he's not sitting there with a goose egg.
Okay, Tyrone Tracy. I assume this is going to be a low number as well.
Yeah, like
it
a 1 or a 2.
Sounds like Cam Scadabo is going to be ready.
Yeah,
Kyle?
I'm going like a 1, 2. Isn't Devin Singletary there too? I mean, there's still other guys there. Yeah. It's not just Tyrone Tracy. New coaching staff. They want to be powerful. That's Cam Scadabo.
Kyle Monangai.
Tier 2 is hard. Do I think he can climb up to tier 3, like verge tier 2, tier 3? I think he can, but it's going to take a DeAndre Swift injury. So I'm going to put him right at about probably like a 4.5.
Headliner Nation, going through all the volume monsters in terms of running backs last season. But like I said, this video series is not even close to being done. We're going to be breaking down the other positions. We've got insane efficiency left to go. So you got to make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here. Hey, there's a membership button down below that you could also join. Head on over to our exclusive Discord where the conversations have been popping off this season about Dynasty, about trades, about redraft strategies, and about what shirt we should put together next for Headliner Nation. Jake, any parting words?
No, but I do think that this is important for people to pay attention to volume and efficiency, because as we get closer to draft season, you're not going to know what names on the board when you're on the clock, so you need to know how to label each one of these guys so you aren't just like packing your team full of volume dependent guys in case there is an injury or something that comes up.
Be careful when it comes to packing your guys with volume. Stay safe and healthy, Headliner Nation, and we'll catch you later.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.